Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nithin Ramachandra from the Nithin Sports Rush, back with the second episode of this new show. I'm really excited for this episode. I hope everyone is having a great week. Happy Wednesday. Miami Dolphin fans, you got to tune in for this one. We have a special treat. We got former Miami Dolphins wide receiver O.J. McDuffie joining here pretty soon. He went to Penn State for college. Man, what a great wide receiver, underrated receiver in my opinion. He was the NFL receptions leader in his career. He played with Dan Marino throughout his career, and he spent with the Miami Dolphins for his whole entire career, which is rare. Now you see that in the NFL, a lot of players changing teams, but O.J. McDuffie got to stay with one team in Miami, and like I said, underrated receiver. He was a dog on the field, competitive, toughness, and loved to compete. And O.J. McDuffie has a show called The Fish Tank 81 with Seth Levitt, which we'll get to. We're going to talk about his journey, draft process, since the draft is coming up next week. So we'll talk about his draft experience and what can the Miami Dolphins do to improve, and some of his stories that he had on and off the field with Miami. And so without further ado, let's bring in O.J. McDuffie, Dolphins legend, into the show. What's up, O.J.? Thanks for joining.
What's up, man? How you doing, man?
Good. I'm excited for this. We finally made it happen. I know you were busy covering the Dolphins, and you have your own show, the Fish Tank 81, which we'll get to with Seth Levitt. But we finally made this happen. Thank you for joining on the new platform here. And how are you and your family doing?
We're doing well, man. We're doing really well. Getting ready for the draft like everybody else. It's always an exciting time of year. Obviously, I follow the Dolphins pretty closely, and our free agency wasn't as, it didn't have much luster to it, but I expect us with so many draft picks to make a splash in the draft and, and get ready to get the season. NFL season doesn't stop. It seems like it doesn't stop. Once February is over after the Super Bowl, then you start looking at all the guys you want in free agency. Then, of course, the tampering period, and you get the free agents. Then next thing you know, the draft is here. And before we know it, we'll be in OTAs.
Yeah, so speaking of the draft, I want to start off with your draft experience. Talk about, you got drafted in 1993, first round, 25th pick by the Miami Dolphins, a great organization. Just talk about your draft experience. It's different now, but talk about what was it like for you to get drafted by the Miami Dolphins, and how special was that for you?
Yeah, it was really special. All the guys that you see, that are going to get drafted coming up here, I mean, they all dreamed about playing in the NFL. And then that's a childhood dream. If you didn't dream about playing in the NFL, then you probably didn't do all the things that led up to getting you there. All the work that goes into it, from your pee-wees to your middle school to your high school. Unfortunately, I got a scholarship to college, and so I just knew that if I just kept grinding on what I love, which is football, that I'd have an opportunity. And sure as hell, man, I got a chance to to get drafted by the Dolphins. And I'm gonna tell you, it was like when that childhood dream was realized, and I'll tell you how it happened, because it wasn't normal. I knew that there were a couple other receivers that were going to go ahead of me in the draft. I went to combine and didn't work out. Did my pro day at Penn State, so I didn't know who the hell was looking at me at that point. I couldn't gauge any interest at all. What I was told was that I was going to go to San Diego, the 22nd pick. But my whole thing, though, Nithin, it was just to get into the first round. I didn't care where I went. I wanted to go close to home, which is I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, so either the Browns or the Bengals, or I wanted to go close to Penn State, which is where I went to college, either so Pittsburgh or Philly, or I wanted to go warm. So on that great day in April, when I got that phone call, the 25th pick, from Don Shula, asked me the craziest question ever. He asked me, would I like to be a Miami Dolphin? What kind of question is that? Hell yeah, I want to be a Miami Dolphin, But leading up to that, knowing that I wasn't going, until the 20th pick, I actually took a nap until the 20th pick. I laid down and I was tired because I'll be honest with you, I was at Penn State the night before. We had a great time. I knew that the draft was coming the next day, and all the hay was in the barn already. So hell, they're going to take me or they're not going to take me, and I was just going to have a good time one last time at Penn State. But I was so tired when I got back to my house in Cleveland and took a nap. Got one phone call. It was Don Shula. So I got Don Shula, I got Dan Marino, and I got Warm down here in Miami.
Wow. Yeah, so what a crazy draft story for you. And but I want to go back. You were born in Ohio, and speaking of Ohio, you went to high school in Ohio. And what made you choose Penn State? Talk about that, because did you get any offers from Ohio State or any schools local? But what made you choose Penn State?
Yeah, it was a tough decision. I actually, a lot of these guys, you see a lot of these guys that are in the league. Some guys have, a few offers or a couple offers. I had like 80 scholarship offers coming out of high school, and Ohio State was my main. I mean, they were on me since my freshman year in high school. They offered me really early, offered me my sophomore year in high school. And what happened with Ohio State was I was locked and loaded to go to Ohio State, but they fired Earl Bruce my senior year, and it kind of opened up the recruiting for everybody else. So just narrowed it down to the 5 schools that I was looking at. I looked at UCLA, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, of course, and Notre Dame. Those are my 5 schools. And once Ohio State made the decision they made with Earl Bruce, I narrowed it down to my final 2, which became Notre Dame and Penn State. My mom wanted me to go to Notre Dame. I wanted to go to Penn State, and I guess the rest is history from that point.
Well, yeah. So what was it like playing for Penn State? Rich tradition also with that college, and LeVar Harrington went there. A bunch of legendary players went there. And what was it like for you to play with Penn State? A passionate fan base too. They get wild, and that stadium gets loud when they play in big games.
Yeah, you know what? And I think that's what swung me. What really, I'm gonna tell you the reason I went to Penn State. A couple reasons. Yeah, the tradition is one thing. I hated the uniform. I hated the uniforms all the way up until I went to school there, which is crazy. Like I say, oh, these uniforms are terrible. And now I love them, of course, wearing them for 4.5 years when I was there. But then you get to the situation where the guys that hosted me when I was on my trip, just incredible guys. When I realized when I wasn't playing football or going to class, there's some guys that I really, really enjoyed hanging out with. And that was important. And Joe Paterno was super important in me making that decision too, because Joe, when I came back from my UCLA visit, of course, everybody, I'd never been on a plane until I went to the UCLA trip. This 17, 18-year-old kid, never flown before. But when I got back from UCLA late that night, that Monday morning, I got a FedEx package from Joe Paterno, 7-page letter on a spiral notebook pad, on spiral notebook paper, outlining the pros and cons of going to Penn State. Wow. And the fact that he took the time, to let me know they really wanted me there. Whereas some schools, I felt like they wanted me there, but I wasn't a priority for them. He made it a priority for me there. And on top of that, one of my, prerequisites was that I was going to play baseball. I had to play baseball in college as well, because I played baseball all my life. And, I knew I had an opportunity to play pro ball as well. So Joe outlined all that. The guys that were there, my visit was amazing, and it made my decision pretty simple at that point, man. And the uniforms they didn't matter at that point. I could try to dress it up somehow, some way to make it look flashy as much as I could, man. And it was just all about Joe, the guys there, and the university itself.
Yeah, so you're like Bo Jackson, playing multiple sports also. So for you, playing baseball also at the same time in college, and for you, what was it like playing? Now you see kids playing multiple sports in this generation, but for you, how important was it for you to play multiple sports, learning the way of it, and also, would you say baseball helped you in a way that when you transitioned into football also?
Yeah, it's a great question. Growing up in Ohio, we had to go indoors at some point, right? So we played football in the fall, basketball I played, in the winter, and then during the spring I did both track and baseball. So I try to play everything, and I think it's a great idea for kids to play everything, but it's also a great idea to play everything so you don't get burnt out on one sport.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of guys, especially down here, guys either play one sport, that's it. Baseball, they play football, they might run track. They don't do anything else because they can do everything year round. And so track was one thing that I never really thought that I would enjoy, but our track coach asked me to come out and do some running, but pretty much all I did was jump. I high jumped and long jump. And so I played a Saturday baseball game, a doubleheader that day. I play the first game, then I go get my jumps in track, and then I come back and play the second game in baseball just so I could qualify for states and track, because I wasn't able to do it like all the time. I wasn't able to be out there all the time. So back to your question, I think it's super important that these different sports, they teach you different muscles in your body. They give you, opportunities to learn different things. Like, hell, I played football from late July all the way through December because we made the playoffs, and then I get to basketball season and I'm out of gas. I'm like, it's a different conditioning. So I think different sports give you different opportunities. And they work different parts of your body. Obviously, it worked different conditioning. So it was super important for me to be able to play as many sports as I could, as long as I could, until I had to make a decision on which one I was going to specialize in.
Wow. Yeah, and like for some people, like it's great. It's amazing to see like some like you guys, like some sort. Like for example, if no one knew about this, but Tom Brady got drafted by the Expos before playing football. So
Yeah.
you get these interesting stories from different athletes, how they started, and then finally choosing another sport or sticking with that sport. But
Right.
it's truly amazing to see stories like that come true for you guys.
Yeah, well, most of those quarterbacks played baseball too. You look at the
Yeah.
Elways, the Marinos, the Kyler Murrays, those big arms when they're throwing 95 miles an hour. I don't know if Tom Brady was throwing 95 miles an hour, but some of those other guys, they had those big arms, man. But I think that's one of the things that gets you more looks, Nathan, because you look at these colleges when they come to recruit, they usually get there in their next sport. They see you in football, they see your film, but they want to see how athletic you are. And basketball is one of those sports that can highlight your athleticism, and then on to other sports. And I think that gives you an opportunity for guys to be like, instead of bringing me in as a wide receiver, or actually played running back in high school, but bring me as a wide receiver, they can bring me in as an athlete because they see that I can do different things. So I thought it was always important.
Yeah. So speaking of Dan Marino, you come in as a rookie. Most teams are looking for their quarterback still, but you guys had a quarterback there already with Dan Marino, one of the best to ever do it. So for you coming in as a rookie, what was it like seeing him in the same locker room and getting to know him as a player and on and off the field? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was crazy. Because coming from college, a lot of college athletes, one thing they do a lot of is play Madden. They're playing video games in college, and to actually be using Dan Marino in Madden one week, and then being in the same locker room and on his football team the next week, it was surreal. It really was. And you got Urban Fryer, who you use in Madden, Keith Jackson, and Mark Ingram, and Keith Byers. Keith Byers is one of my favorite guys growing up because he went to Ohio State, and I loved Ohio State growing up. But it was crazy, man. Only thing that Dan and I had a problem with at the beginning was he's a Pitt guy. I'm a Penn State guy. We don't usually gel sometimes, but we got over it pretty fast, though. We got over really fast.
Yeah, so talk about some of the stories you had and like the rivals between Penn State and like Ohio State, and you just mentioned Pitt. Just talk about the rival games. How big was that for you, and important games too. But just talk about like the rivals and like trash talking.
Yeah, so there's always that. The locker room's great. It's great too. The fact that I didn't get a chance to play in the Big Ten, I missed about 1 year. They played the following year, which sucked because I grew up in the Big Ten. And I just couldn't wait to play it. All the other sports went in, but football had to wait 1 more year because they had other contracts they had to take care of and honor. But man, it was like when you get in that locker room, you got some of the guys that played for some of the schools like Pitt. We destroyed Pitt in college. I love rubbing it in Danny Marino. Once I got to know him a little bit better, because at the beginning, man, I'm trying to get him to throw me the football. So I don't want to rub him the wrong way too soon until I got to know him really well. But like I said, Keith Byers is in the locker room. We bet every single Ohio State, Penn State game, and our bet was always, kiwi, strawberry, Snapple. But everything was always like, that Saturday is important for a lot of people. But you'd be shocked, though, how many players in that locker room didn't care about what their team was doing on Saturday. I cared about exactly what I always cared about what Penn State was doing on Saturday. KB always cared about what Ohio State was doing on Saturday. Danny always cared about what Pitt was doing on Saturday, because we all still have that school pride, man. We always love to see our universities succeed.
Yeah. So can you talk about the transition from being from a cold weather state and then going to a warm weather state? How long because for some players, it takes a little while to transition from a cold weather to warm. But for you, how long did it take you to transition from a cold weather to a warm weather state?
Oh man, I struggled the first week. Cramps, lost weight, had to get in the cold tub a lot. It was it was tough. The humidity down here was unbearable. And we had just played a bowl game down here in January that year, but the weather wasn't quite the same when I got there in April. So it is a tough transition. And all you can do is just get out there and get in the elements, and then your blood thins out and you feel a lot better about yourself. But hydration is always important, but it was definitely a tough transition. You look at any other, team, the beginning of the season, most of the season, 3/4 of the season is not bad weather. It doesn't get bad until December, January, anywhere else. But in Miami, it was hot the whole damn time. And so that was a tough transition, but it was all about getting out there in the elements, running around. I always wore long sleeve shirts like I have on now, just so I could, I wanted to get as much sweat as I could get going, and just getting used to the environment.
Yeah. So obviously top receiver, you had like Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin throughout the back in the day, but I feel like you didn't get really talked about. But just talk about what was it like being at the wide receiver position for you, and just talk about like your overall career at the wide receiver, because I said it in the beginning, you had an underrated career, put up some big numbers, and I feel like you didn't get talked about that much because they were always talking about Jerry Rice, Mike Irvin, and the other receivers. Just talk about your general aspect of that.
Yeah, a lot of those guys get those that notoriety because they're going to Pro Bowls, they're playing in Super Bowls, they're winning Super Bowls, and that's always key. Danny obviously didn't win a Super Bowl, man, but his numbers were incredible. Went to a bunch of Pro Bowls and was all pro a lot. And hell, we didn't help him win Super Bowls, and that's because football is such a team sport. So, I think I got all the love that I deserved. I led the league one year, like you talked about. In 1998, I led the league in receptions, but at the same time, though, it was nothing flashy. 8 touchdowns, I think, a little over 1,000 yards. But these guys were making – the guys you're talking about, they're Mount Rushmore wide receivers, obviously. Jerry Rice, the greatest ever. Michael Irvin, obviously, in the Hall of Fame as well. So you just got to have consistent years like that. My years were consistent, but they just weren't at that level, and our team didn't reach those levels that those guys got. Where you get the most notoriety is when your team is winning and having a lot of success.
Yeah. So talk about your you spent, like you said, with one team throughout your career, 8 seasons with the Miami Dolphins, and talk about how special. Unfortunately, you guys didn't win a Super Bowl, but just talk about how special was it to be with one team. Spend it with 8 years, and Dan Marino with most of them, and the fans. You guys have amazing fans also, just like Penn State. And just talk about the 8 special years you had there.
Yeah, I actually, Nithin, it's 9 officially. On my pension, it says 9. So an extra year means a lot. It really does. It really does mean a lot. But my last year I stole. My 9th year I was just stealing money from the Dolphins because I couldn't play because of my foot injury at that point. But it was special, man, because you think about it, you come in, I came to the Dolphins in 93. They had just traded Mark Clayton. Mm-hmm. Mark Duper was still in camp, in our mini camp, and then we let Mark Duper go. So coming into Miami and having to be one of the guys that's replacing the Marks brothers, that was huge. Thank goodness I had Irvin Fryer and Mark Ingram, who were the guys that were really counting on to do that. And, of course, Tony Martin was on our team at that point, a young Tony Martin. So I came in really as a return guy. So I didn't have as much pressure on me to go out there and play wide receiver, but I still had that pressure to go out there being a first-round pick for the team. So I got my name from the beginning from returning kicks. Returned a kickoff against Atlanta in the first preseason game for a touchdown, returned a Sunday night punt against Indianapolis for a touchdown, returned a Monday night punt against Pittsburgh for a touchdown. So that's how I kind of, made my way onto the football team or became accepted by these veteran guys on the football team. Because I'm going to tell you what, bro, you catch a lot of heat being a first-round pick.
Yeah.
And you got all these veteran guys, you get a nice signing bonus for some guys that are grinding their 5th or 6th year that haven't made that kind of money yet. The NFL is crazy, man, especially when you deal with grown men that have families and things like that. But once I got in, once I, kind of made a name for myself, then it became really, really cool to be able to go out there and have Danny count on me like he counted on Mark Duper, Mark Clayton at times.
And talk about that connection and talk about the chemistry between you and Dan and having him believing in you. Like you said before, it took a little while in the beginning to get the chemistry, but once you got the chemistry down, what was that like? Just like right from there, and how special was that for you guys both?
Yeah, man, it was great. It really was. A guy I give a lot of credit to my success with the Dolphins is a guy named Scott Miller. And Scott Miller was a guy played wide receiver for us, but he also returned kicks. And Scott kind of knew that I was the guy that was probably going to come in and replace him in the return game and probably be the fourth or fifth receiver at that point as well. But he taught me so much about the game. And he told me, learn every single position of wide receiver. Don't just learn X or Z or Y or whatever they put you at. Learn every single position. Excuse me. And once I did that, that's when Danny started seeing me have the knowledge of the playbook. The playbook was so vast and it had no rhyme or reason. It was all memorization. And so once I started memorizing all these different positions, they could plug me in anywhere. And so Danny could trust that I was going to be where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there. And that's when we started, like, no matter what, third and whatever, I could have two guys on me. Danny knows I'm going to be at the right spot. And Danny throws such a great ball that, we were able to still convert. And that connection started growing and growing and growing until the day Danny retired, when, he knew that I was the guy that I hope knew that I was one of the guys that helped prolong his career and helped him along the way at the end there.
Yeah. So talk about your jersey. You wore 81. Also, just talk, what made you pick 81 in Miami?
81 picked me. So, back in the day, you see these receivers now, they wear any number they want now, teams and all that other stuff, because a lot of organizations are actually retiring numbers. But back when I played, if you played tight end or wide receiver, you had to wear 80s, And when I got there's only one 80s number left, and it was 81. And so I was just happy to walk in the locker room and see that I didn't have a team number sitting there, because once camp is over, guys revamp and they get different numbers and stuff like that when you cut guys and things like that. So the fact that I had an 80 number, I was stoked, man. So 81, is one I got. I wanted 84, but a good friend of mine, Greg Beatty, had 84 because if I couldn't get 24 from Penn State, I'd want 84 in the pros, but 81 is what I got, and I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, so you played in the AFC East, and talk about going against the Bills, Jets, Patriots, and talk about going against those teams.
Yeah, I hate them. I hated them, and I still hate them. Yeah, they were tough, man. When I got there in the 90s, the Dolphins and the Bills were going back and forth, and it was always tough. And the Jets always, no matter what's going on with the Jets, they always gave us fits, because it's been just that history of playing against each other since the 70s. And the Patriots, I mean, the Dolphins owned the Patriots throughout the whole 70s. And then all of a sudden, towards the end, they got really good with this guy named Tom Brady that you mentioned earlier. I still hate the Indianapolis Colts, and they're not even in our division anymore. So the Colts are another ones that that were tough to deal with, man. But always great rivalries. No matter how good any team in our division thought they were, it was always going to be a dogfight. We can go into, and this is not, I don't know if this is not accurate, but say we go into a game and like we're 11-2 and we're playing against a 3-10, Patriots team. It's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah,
because we all know so much about each other. We all hate each other so much. It's going to be a hell of a game, and it always was, man. And it was just a great division to play in. It became, really tough when you got, the Don Shulers, and you also had the Bill Parcells, or you have some of these coaches that are just like NFC East type coaches. It became more of a physical conference when I got there, division when I got there, and it was right up our alley.
Yeah, speaking of coaches, you had in this NFL history, you have a lot of legendary coaches. But what was it like learning from Don Shula in Miami and getting to know him? And he was a great coach too. But talk about what was it like playing for Don Shula?
Yeah, you know what? It was an easy handoff from me going from Joe Paterno to Don Shula. I think they were the same type of coaches, man. Tough, very demanding, very respected by everybody. Teams we were playing against, guys in the locker room, throughout the organizations. And so it was a nice, smooth handoff for me, not knowing, what to expect from Coach Shula. But I think Coach Paterno and our staff had us ready to go into the next level and ready for a coach like Don Shula. It's crazy because, the biggest difference, I think, is both of them got their point across different ways. Joe Paterno never cursed. So you'll never hear Joe use a 4-letter word. That's not the same situation for Don Shula. So Shula will let you have it as he talking to a grown man. And so, yeah, that was the biggest difference, man. But, Coach Shula's offense, centered around what Dan Marino could do, was so like it was complicated. It really was. But man, he had a rhyme and reason for everything, and that's why our offense is able to gel as much as it did. So I learned a lot. I learned about, honestly, you go to college, you go from a boy to a man, but then you get to the pros, and now you've got manhood. So that was worrying about your bills and worrying about your, being there all day. That was one thing that a lot of guys don't realize when you go to the pros. Like, it's your job now. You're gonna get there at 7 in the morning, and you're gonna leave there at 7 at night.
Yeah.
Everything in between that comes with it. Whereas in college, you go to class, you go lunch, you go, got some meetings, you go practice, and then you go study hall. That's it. That's it. A little different when you got to that next level. So that was important for Coach Shula to let us know, like, look, you guys are pros. Here's the playbook. Learn it. If we haven't installed it, still learn it and go from there. It's our job.
Yeah, you brought up a great point. And once you get into NFL, you said provide and also providing for the family. And speaking of family, I love talking about the players' families on this on the shows. And so talk about your family and for you and for them to be able to stay in one place throughout your career and then having them as a support system also. So what was it like having your family behind your back throughout your career and staying in one place also?
Yeah, well, it was great. For me, I waited a long time to actually have kids, so I didn't have my kids until after I retired. But my mom was one of 13 children, so all my uncles and all my aunts, they were my siblings growing up. So they were always a huge part of me and my success. My Uncle Homer taught me everything I know about sports. I told you I played 4 sports in high school. He taught me all those. So I owe most of my success to him, at least giving me that foundation on sports and being competitive. But yeah, my family has been more important now that I retired, because I think that's the toughest part for guys is when they don't have the gig, when they're not walking out there in front of 70,000 people, when they don't have the notoriety and all that. You lean on your family, and that's where my family's been invaluable for me ever since I retired, quite a few years ago.
Well, yeah. So now I'm going to bring up your awards you had throughout your career. You were the Dolphins Walk of Fame, Paul Warfield Trophy, All-American. You got the first team All East, and you got the Fiesta Bowl MVP. So for you, what was that like to have all that in your career, those awards, and how special is that too?
Yeah, you know what? It's nice to be recognized in some of those things. But bottom line is this: I didn't win anything special.
Yeah.
I lost my state championship in high school. My senior year, we got beat. Penn State, we got a game away from getting into probably a national championship opportunity, and we didn't get that done. Then you look in the pros, we we won a couple conference championships, but then division championships, but then we advanced in the playoffs, never got past or never even got to the AFC championship game. So when you talk about a sport like football, it's all about team, and it's an ultimate team sport, that cliche. Hell, I didn't accomplish anything. Individual awards were great, and I still have the trophies. They're somewhere around here in the house. But same time, though, man, I want that. I wanted a ring.
Yeah.
I want the real hardware that you see a lot of these guys that really got some big things accomplished in the sport of football that they're wearing, and they wear it proudly, man. So I've always been the guy that's envious of those guys that have gone on to win championships, because that's what it's all about. It's all about, especially when you play a team sport, it's all about winning championships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who are some of the toughest defensive backs you have to go against in your career?
Oh man, well, it started off right away when I got to the Dolphins. Troy Vincent,
Mm-hmm.
he was a big wig now with the NFL, and JB Brown. Those guys, man, they were tough to deal with right away. So I got to some of the toughest work I had against anybody was in practice every single day. And and of course in practice, they don't call holding, they don't call pass interference. They just let these dudes just mug you. There's a couple guys that are still holding me right now. And I tell them every time I see them, stop, you still hold me. So those guys were tough. And then I had to deal with Pat Surtain and Sam Madison in practice.
Oh, wow.
Pat's son, the second, he's defensive player of the year. So tell you how good he was. His dad was really good, and you see how good his son is. But then the teams that we played against, man, still to this day, you look at some guys that I played with, played against, and it was tough. Playing in the AFC East was always tough.
Yeah.
Ty Law still gives me nightmares. Ty Law was strong, long arms, could run, physical. Guys like that were tough, man. And then you play these guys so much, it's hard to beat them. They know a lot about you, man. But Ty Law was probably the biggest problem I had as a wide receiver playing for the Dolphins.
Well, yeah, Tyler was a great player too when he was playing. And speaking of obviously the draft is coming up soon, and you mentioned kick returns, and you did some kick returns, and now to a lot of special teams is really important now in today's game. And what would you tell like these receivers or these running backs or receivers in the draft that are trying to make the team, trying to get drafted? What would you tell them about special teams, and then that's how you can make the team also.
It's the most important way to make the team.
Yeah.
If you're not drafted in the first or second round, you better figure out something on teams. And it's important. You want to buddy up with any special teams coach that comes to your pro days or whatever. You want to let him know that you'll do anything to make the team, because that's where most of the bread's buttered.
Yeah.
You got a guy like Larry Izzo came in to the Miami Dolphins. I think he had like a 15-year career or something like that playing special teams, because that's what it's all about. If you're not a starter, you're going to be playing special teams somewhere. And you better let the coaches and organization know that you're willing to play and do anything on special teams, because when they go to fill out that 53-man roster, most of those guys at the end, when your special team coach is clamoring for one guy, it's a guy that's willing to do whatever for the team. And that's always a tough deal, man. I think the special team coaches, they make the final decisions on most of the rosters at the end. So special teams, humble yourself, because, most of us that come out of college, we had to worry about special teams. We were starters. Everybody that goes to these teams, they were starters, And so when you get to the league, everybody can't be starters, so you better be ready to go out there and contribute somehow, some way. And the best way to do it is do it on special teams.
Yeah, and speaking of the two, so you got two stars from Penn State who were in this year's draft, Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren. To talk about those two players, because they're getting all the hype right now. Someone told me that Tyler Warren can be even better than Travis Kelce. But what are your thoughts on Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter?
Tyler Warren was Penn State last year.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some great running backs. They didn't have the same year they had the year before. But if it were for Tyler Warren, we don't get to the semifinal game against Notre Dame. Tyler Warren he's a grown, we call him he's a grown ass man. Big, strong, fast, can do everything. Played quarterback in high school, super athletic, just fun to watch. I mean, he just made amazing plays over and over, and he's going to be an amazing pro. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. I hope he falls to 13 to us. That'd be ideal if we can get him to fall to 13. But I don't know if he will. Abdul Carter is just, anybody wearing sticks, the 11s. You talk about LeVar Arrington earlier, Micah Parsons. Those guys right there, all special guys. And boy, was Abdul. He was really, really good. And crazy, because he could come back for another year, but I get why he didn't. You're going to be a top 5 pick, get out and go make that money. And I think James Franklin, our head coach at Penn State, feels the exact same way. So, I mean, these two guys are going to be instant impact guys in the NFL. And that's important. It really is, man, because what it does is it helps out all the other guys. Now, if we're recruiting tight ends, they can say, look what we did for Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
Or recruiting linebackers, we're still linebacker you. But look what Abdul Carter was able to accomplish when we moved him to the outside. Like we moved Chop Robinson to the outside, and then we drafted him first round to the Miami Dolphins. So I think those guys are going to be just special. I'm looking forward to seeing where they're going. I hope they stay out of the AFC East, so I have to deal with them. Or if they're going to be in the AFC East, make sure they're Miami Dolphin players.
Yeah. So speaking of Miami Dolphins, you're close with them, and obviously the show, the Fish Tank 81, and you play with them. So what do you think the Dolphins should do in this year's draft to improve the team? And we've been hearing that they might trade Jalen Ramsey, but we don't know. But let's talk about what do you think the Dolphins should do?
Yeah, you know what? We have a lot of holes to fill. We really do. I love some of our young talent. I really do. I think we got some guys that can absolutely ball. But if we're talking about getting rid of Jalen Ramsey, we're going to be without our one of the best that ever played the game at cornerback. We lost both our safeties. I think Calais Campbell, he's gone. So we got a lot of revamping to do on defense. I would go, if I were thinking draft, I would think a lot on the defensive side of football. Our defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, I thought did a heck of a job in his first year for the team. And I think he's going to go on and do bigger and better things. We got a lot of guys that actually showed up pretty well for us last year that were forced into action. An undrafted guy like Storm Duck came in, and he did a heck of a job playing a lot of different positions. Kader Coe, who's our inside outside safety guy, he did a heck of a job for us. And don't forget that we were strapped. We really had to draft Chop because Bradley Chubb was hurt. Jalen Phillips was hurt. Those are two dynamic defensive ends that should be back and doing big things for us. So I would start defense, because, it's a cliche, but defense can travel. Defense can go into the cold weather and play well, and I think that's always important. So, for a wide receiver to say, go get defensive guys, that must mean a lot,
Yeah. Yeah. So for you being a fellow receiver, who are some of the receivers that you like in this year's draft coming up?
Oh man, there's so many. I haven't really looked at much of it. But how about Travis Hunter? Let's give him a wide receiver. He's a wide receiver that's and any wide receiver coming out of Ohio State, you got to give them some love. I haven't really paid a lot of attention. I've been looking at the tight ends more than anything because I know a lot of them. The Mason Taylors, the Rondé Gaston II, of course Tyler Warren. I've been paying a little more attention to those tight ends because they're like my little brothers, So, but I'm gonna look at that wide receiver position a little bit more. But yeah, I hadn't paid a lot of attention to it.
Yeah. So before we get to go any further, speaking of receivers, I want to send my prayers and thoughts to Kyron Tracy, the former LSU wide receiver. He was supposed to be in this year's draft. Unfortunately, what happened, and my prayers and thoughts are with his family and friends. I just want to bring that up here. So, my prayers and thoughts, man. But a tough situation and tough thing for LSU, especially his former teammates or current teammates. So shout outs to go to them.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Very tragic story, man. And definitely thoughts and prayers for all the families involved, everybody involved, because it's, things like that affect so many people, especially, high profile athletes, things like that affect a lot of people, man. So thoughts and prayers go out to everybody as well, for sure.
Yeah. So before we get to your show, can you? I want to ask you, what is one thing that people that don't know about you? What is one thing that people don't know about you?
Oh, I got probably that I used to be a hell of a bowler at some point. Yeah, so bowling, I used to love bowling. I bowled a little bit in college. I bowled when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, and I didn't bowl. But then once I got in the pros, a good friend of mine, Tim Mack, who's one of the big guys with Storm bowling, he got me into bowling, sent me some equipment. I started going out there, my best friend, Kajana Carter, and we just started bowling on Tuesdays. And hell, I got, I bowled 299 twice and had a 300 in bowling. Wow. So I think that's probably the one thing that a lot of people don't know about me, is that not only did I play those other sports, but once I got into bowling, the competitiveness came out of me, and that's one of the things I was able to accomplish.
Wow, that's amazing. Bowl. Yeah, I didn't even know that. That's cool. Do you still bowl? Do you still bowl?
I go out there, every other Tuesday probably. I'm not averaging anywhere close to what I used to, but I'll bowl 185, 190 on average on, going out there.
How about golf? You play golf?
Not very well. I go out there and I do some charity events and I contribute a shot or two here. If I'm playing in the scramble, I feel good about myself.
Yeah. So let's get to your show, the Fish Tank 81 with Seth Levitt, man. This show is amazing. When did you guys start this show, and how often do you guys do this show, the Fish Tank 81?
Yeah, so Seth, we started over 5 years ago, and it was Seth's idea because Seth works for he runs Jason Taylor's foundation, and so every time we're at events, the guys just sit around and all they do is tell stories. All they do are tell stories. Like, and Seth's like, you know what? We could make a podcast out of some of these stories these guys tell. Some of them are just amazing storytellers, and some of them have the best stories about how they got to where they're at, and things like that. And so Seth came up with the idea, and so we started recording. Actually, we started recording at my house on my pool table. We had a couple guests, Channing Crowder and guys like that. The Pouncey twins came through. And then Jason Jenkins, God rest his soul, an amazing guy for the Miami Dolphins that worked with the Miami Dolphins, the vice president, one of the vice presidents. He asked our show to come to the Miami Dolphins podcast network. And we've been there ever since, man. We've been just putting out pods. We do 32 shows a year.
Wow.
And just trying to bring different content, not just players. We got the guys from security, the guys that were our equipment manager. We have a guy that's an ops guy. We have all these different guys come on and tell you different stories about their experience with the Miami Dolphins. And it's like, for me, I learn something new every time when it comes to this, because you never know how much goes into putting on a football game when you're talking to, our equipment guy, changing just the changing cleats when you're in a bad weather game, and you don't realize all the stuff that goes on in their minds when they're packing these trunks to make sure that Dan Marino has the right size spikes in his shoes, and and how important it was. And when he makes a play and you see him out there scraping the mud, and you don't even think about that until he goes out there and plants again well and makes a throw, and you're like, these guys that go unnoticed a lot of times, man, but their story is absolutely incredible, man. So I just love those stories. And then too, with the Dolphins are such a great organization. Mr. Ross does such a great job, along with Nat Moore and Tom Garfinkel, of putting us all together. We see each other from the teams in the 70s all the way up to the guys that might have retired last year, and everybody in between. We know each other very well. So the guys that I don't know personally, when I get those guys on our podcast and learn about them a little bit more away from football, that's some fun stuff for us right there.
Wow. And where can the fans find you? All the people can on all platforms? Yeah,
on all platforms at the Fish Tank 81, on X, on Instagram. We put out content now. We're in every other week, so we've got next week we have Joey Harrington, which is a great story, man. It's amazing because it's another guy that I didn't really know personally, but then to hear what he was going through after he left Detroit, and when he came down here and what he was dealing with, wow, it was just an incredible story, and a story that I don't think a lot of people have heard. So that's the fun part of doing the podcast.
Yeah, so you got to tell Seth that the Jason Taylor Foundation is really amazing, inspiring. They do a great job, him and his wife and his family. And I ran into, actually, if I tell you a story, we did a GTSM show 3 weeks ago in New Jersey, and I ran into Zach Thomas. Yeah, so he's a cool guy, and I talked to him for a little bit, and we got to chop it up, and we talked about the Jason Taylor Foundation, and everyone speaks highly of it. So tell Seth that he's doing a great job with Jason Taylor and his wife. So
I certainly will, man. He'll appreciate that, man. Yeah. He busts his tail all the time, man. He burns it on all ends, man. He's got that. He's got a couple other podcasts he works on. Yeah. He's got a beautiful family that that are with brilliant kids and amazing. So Seth does not sleep very much. So he'll definitely appreciate the appreciation.
Yeah, thank you. And there you have it. OJ McDuffie, Miami Dolphins wide receiver legend, played for Penn State. Man, what a great career, in my opinion. And thank you for joining. I got you on right timing, and I know you're busy with the draft coming up next week. But thank you again for sharing your story on the show. And we'll stay connected, obviously. And
absolutely.
And then keep up the great work with your show. And we'll follow your show. And you guys are the best. So thank you for joining this platform. And thank you. And have a great day.
Man, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to doing this again. We have to do it again.
Yeah, we got to do it again, maybe after the draft or before the season starts. So
when you let me know, bro, you got me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, bro. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.